This episode of GMspiration is brought to you by Dancing Dave's Dancing Craze. Feel left out? Want to join the cool kids but can't break a boogie or cut a rug? Come down to Dancing Dave's Dancing Craze. We'll teach you the best moves that all the kids are craving, including the loose caboose, the gyrating goose, and the bearded salmon. You'll never be square with these hip moves.
Under Section 342.9c, we are required to inform you that Dancing Dave is not allowed within 100 metres of government buildings, lakes, or streets with more than 3 E's in the name. Dancing Dave categorically denies that his dancing business is a cult.
So come on down to Dancing Dave's today.
When I started researching this episode, I did not expect so much disagreement on what is a cult and what isn't. I foolishly thought I could just find a short description, provide you with some movie examples, and then jump into making some examples of our own. Instead, I found 2 things. First, our general use of the word often simplifies the meaning to any group that is intensely aligned behind something. Are you part of an early morning coffee and Pilates group and always talk about it? We'll call that a cult. Of course, that is hyperbole. Similar to how people might say a dessert is to die for. It's not meant to be taken literally. This, though, does make it hard to separate the everyday use of the word with what it actually is. The second thing was how many organizations, be they religious or not, are often called cults. This has led to a crackdown on many sites as to what you can and cannot use as an example of a cult. Today we're going to be discussing writing and running TTPRGs. So I'm not going to weigh in on what current cults may or may not exist, or what things once were cults and are now mainstream. What I will say is that a true cult is a truly horrifying thing. And if you want to write a cult, lean right into that aspect. If you half-heart a cult, you end up with something lacking many of its defining aspects, and ending up with a strange group with atypical beliefs. As such, we're sticking to quite a strict definition that will stop us from accidentally making societies, religions, or some other cult-light group for our fictional worlds. So first question to ask ourselves is, what exactly is a cult? Well, in the real world, people are recruited and manipulated into becoming dependent on a group. The American Psychological Association defines the cult as a religious or quasi-religious group characterized by unusual or atypical beliefs, seclusion from the outside world, and an authoritarian structure. Cults tend to be highly cohesive, well-organized, secretive, and hostile to non-members. So that is a great starting definition. But you can see how there are lots of ors, tend, and characterize statements. Basically, a cult can have those traits or not, and some groups may have those traits and not be a cult. Leaving that alone for now, a second thing to remember is what a cult might be like in a fictional setting where it can have otherworldly links. They could draw upon dark powers, be controlled by magic, mind controlling, or brainwashing. They might follow ideas that move from the realm of the mind into the physical, a manifestation into reality, or sort of collective mental manipulation of reality. So, our definition are that cults are groups of people aligned behind an atypical or unusual ideal or concept. They tend to be secretive, manipulative, and authoritarian, also gathered around a charismatic leader. They can also be religious or quasi-religious. That definition is much better defined. A standout for me is that the beliefs are atypical. You simply cannot have a cult that aligns with the status quo. If you do, it's more likely to be some sort of secret society, government, or religion. So let's separate cults from these and other similar groups. A secret society keeps their actions secret and may have political, financial, criminal, or religious aims. However, members are not united behind a single concept and can be trying to fulfill individual aims. A secret society can also be easy to leave and does not breed dependency. The leader may be secret. In fact, members may not even know who other members are. The beliefs of such a group may also not be atypical. Secret societies can be difficult to join, while cults seek out members. The line between a religion and a cult can be hard to define. Generally, the difference is how open and transparent the group is. A cult will be secretive and seclude itself away from the outside world. A religion will often be open and religious texts shared openly. Now this of course is not always the case. In some parts of the world, minority religions are persecuted and for their own safety, members become secretive. Another good way to separate a religion from a cult is how typical their beliefs are. If you make a cult and everyone in that region is a part of it, then you've ended up making a religion. That happened to me in one of the examples that I'll talk about in the next video. So let's grab some good examples of cults in fiction and see if they align with our definition and how the writers executed the cults in their setting. In Hellblazers in 2022, Joshua, played by Billy Zane, travels to small town USA and sacrifices a person to raise a demon. The movie is a horror with comedy elements, but not quite a comedy horror like Evil Dead 2. Joshua is accompanied by cultists dressed in yellow robes. It is not explained where they come from or who they are, and in fact, they are treated as disposable, blindly throwing themselves at the townsfolk. There is no individuality. This is a trope that we see in many depictions of cults. The motivation of the cultists are never explored, other than Joshua seemingly being driven to spread evil and summon demons. Expendable cults, a charismatic leader, secretive, authoritarian. The idea they are aligned behind is a demon, although they don't exactly go into what and how. But that's okay for this movie. The focus is more on the townsfolk. In the 2020 Empty Man, it involves an ex-cop, James, searching for his neighbor's missing daughter. At least, sort of. There is a lot of other things happening. It clearly has been inspired by creepypasta with some Lovecraftian undertones. The cult that the daughter is mixed up with reveres this titular empty man, and you see glimpses of the cult at various parts of the indoctrination process. The charismatic leader, speaking of the problems of the world, of greed and not belonging, although it is not actually clear if the leader is the actual leader or just a charismatic figurehead. From there, the rituals, and then the removal of individuality. I won't ruin the plot, but it is like many creepypastas or SCPs that deal with thoughts and reality. A common trope in more fictional works is that the cult is able to manipulate the world by their beliefs. Thought plus concentration plus time equals flesh. The movie does a great job in removing the individuality of the cult members. There is one particular scene that is very, very well done. Dark clothes, fire, and a chase. So in this example, we have manipulation, mind control, a lack of individuality, secrecy, a charismatic leader, authoritarianism, and an alignment behind a quasi-religious idea. The next example leans all the way into Lovecraft. 2016's The Void features cultists wearing white robes with a black triangle on the face. The triangle is repeated throughout the movie and is likely a reference to the triangle being a symbol of change. The sort of change in this movie is not what you really want. The way more cultists arrive on the scene, finding out some of the perversions of the cult undertook, and just how deep the infection goes is very well done. Again, we have the faceless cultists, the depravity of the cult, the manipulation of potential members using drugs and other perversions, and the alignment behind a terrible Lovecraftian horror. The charismatic leader is really well done, with preaching to victims at certain points oozing with otherworldly charisma, such as,
"I refuse to let death be the end. I defy God. There are things much older than time, and they have blessed me."
In the 2017 movie Ritual, we find a more gritty representation of an isolated cult living in a hidden community. Spoiler alert on this one. I'm going to go into detail for this plot so we can dissect the cult elements. I'll put a timestamp into the next section if you want to watch the movie, so you can skip ahead. Giving you a few seconds to do that, and I'll begin. 4 friends take a hike in memory of their friend Rob, killed 6 months earlier in a robbery. One of the friends, Luke, was in the store during the robbery and hid while Rob was killed. The hike is then filled with tension, as the other 3 all have varying levels of resentment towards Luke. One friend injures their knee, so they decide to cut through a forest rather than traveling around the edge. Cue scene similar to the Blair Witch, ratcheted up to 11. There is dead and gutted moose and symbols carved into trees. A rainstorm forces them into a very creepy abandoned hut with an effigy of a decapitated human torso made of twigs, with antlers for hands. Somehow, they still decide to stay the night, and the next morning the 4 wake, each experiencing their own horror during the night. Luke dreams of the robbery and his friend being killed. When he wakes, he has a wound on his chest, like fingernails plunged into his chest. One friend is naked, praying to the effigy. One wakes, screaming and having wet himself, and the last one is seized and screaming for his wife. Maybe spending the night in the rain wasn't such a bad idea. As the four continue their journey, they start to get glimpses of something in the forest. We next have some pretty good terror moments, but I'll jump forward as it doesn't directly relate to the cult. Two of the friends find a town of sorts. The town is populated with people with similar wounds as Luke, but having healed over, which turns out to be a mark given to him by the thing in the forest. Luke is marked to live, but the remaining friend, Dom, is chained to the edge of town. A giant thing, a mixture of man and beast. But to Dom, it manipulates his mind, appearing as his wife. Luke can only watch in terror as the facade drops. The creature lifts Dom and impales him on a tree. A young woman in town explains to Luke that it is called a Jotunn, an ancient Norse godlike entity called Moda, supposedly the offspring of the Norse god Loki, that grants the cult immortality in exchange for worship and sacrifices. Luke must submit or be sacrificed. It is then revealed that the nightmares Luke is having and the effects on all his friends when they stayed in the cabin came from Moda's ability to manipulate their minds. Luke, being the one that seemed to have the most regrets in life, was picked to be someone to live in the town. He was chosen because he could be controlled. Moda doesn't seem to feed on the townsfolk or the sacrifices, but rather their worship, or at least it forces them to worship it. Not even death frees the townsfolk from this, as Luke finds a church with the preserved and mummified human remains of townsfolk. At least they appear to be remains, until Luke disturbs them and they start moving and screaming. Luke sets fire to the building and kills the townsfolk attempting to stop him with a gun he finds. He ends up facing the Jotunn, shooting it to little effect. It catches him. The Jotunn doesn't kill him, though it easily could. It tries to get him to assume a subservient pose, itself making a pose which appears like the decapitated torso with antlers for hands. But Luke does not submit. He strikes it with an axe and flees. Luke makes it to the edge of the forest, following the dawning sun. As he falls to the ground past the edge, the Jotunn stops. It is caged in the forest. So let's go through our cultist checklist. Is the group aligned behind an idea or concept? Check. Moda the Jotunn. Are they secretive? Check. They're hidden in a forest and sacrifice and capture anyone that comes across them. Are they manipulative? Check. This part comes a lot from Moda itself. It uses visions and hallucinations. Other part of it comes from the cult, as they attempt to manipulate Luke to watching his friend be sacrificed and joining the cult to keep himself alive. Are they authoritarian? Check. It is submit or be sacrificed. Moda also attempts to make Luke submit rather than kill him. Moda wants to be worshipped. Does the cult have atypical beliefs? They certainly do, worshipping an ancient forest god, Moda. Moda itself seems to have three powers. First, it appears to be either immortal or very hard to kill. It can create illusions and cause dreams, which it has been doing to the four friends as soon as they enter the forest. Lastly, it seems to be able to keep the townsfolk alive somehow, but not in a particularly enticing way, as they still age and their bodies weaken. With that, let's welcome back our time skippers. We're going to split our cults into four major categories based on what they worship or their goal. Drawing from various sources, they are the Apocalypse or Doomsday cult, the Cargo cult, the Evil God cult, or the Self-Improvement cult. So starting with an Apocalypse or Doomsday cult, they desire the end of the world, or at the very least the end of the world as we know it. Sometimes they seek to bring about the end of the world by merging with another, something like hell on earth, or they seek to simply destroy the world, or believe that it's going to end. This is particularly common in Cthulhu mythos, where sometimes the cultists seek to awaken an old god, knowing that it will destroy them and the world with it. In D&D lore, any cult of Thassadun seeks to wake the insane god and unmake reality. This can sometimes overlap with the evil god group, but a cult in this category is specifically trying to destroy the world. It's up to you if your cult falls into one or another category. What I would say is if a cultist is following a god to gain power or a better life, that it falls under the evil god category. If they wish to unmake reality, destroy civilization, or become demons in a new world order, put them in the apocalypse category. If the cult is following an entity that is tricking them into ending the world, put them in the evil god category. While the examples are magical, it can also be scientific. In the 2010 Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, Owlman seeks to destroy the multiverse with a quantum eigenstate device, or QED. Why? Nihilism. Whereas as Batman puts it, they both looked into the abyss and Owlman blinked. We could also apply this to cults that want to destroy the world order, such as that in Fight Club. Their aim is to destroy the banking system, wiping out all financial information and effectively resetting society. Cults in this group should hate the world. People who have lost loved ones, people who have suffered, or have lost faith in existence. The next cult type is cargo cults. The term comes from Melanesia, where indigenous locals built effigies to imitate Western technology and behavior. This includes creating wooden effigies of planes, imitating flag raising, and so on. While the term is somewhat broad in scope, it can be summarized as false worship. Their actions do not have any real impact on the thing they worship. Behaviors can include mimicking or misinterpreting behavior, worshipping inanimate objects, or drawing false causal conclusions. In the original example, the locals were attempting to pray for more cargo, more shipments, and more aid. One such example is from Planet of the Apes movies and the Alpha Omega bomb cult. They worship a nuclear bomb that they believe represented the bombs that brought them life. They believe it's a sentient thing, able to see them and interact with them. Whereas of course in reality, it's just a bomb, which if triggered would ignite the atmosphere and destroy the world. The Ewoks in Return of the Jedi worship C-3PO. It appears this is due to his golden and shiny appearance, something the Stone Age Ewoks would not have seen. It is revealed in the novelization of the movie that the Ewoks have a prophecy that foretold C-3PO's arrival. To quote the book, "This golden god, whose return to us has been prophesied since the first tree, tells us now he will not be our master, tells us we are free to choose as we will, that we must choose, as all living things must choose their own destiny." C-3PO has the Ewok language in his database. Perhaps there was a similar unit that visited the Ewoks in the past. Regardless, they falsely worship C-3PO due to his color and the prophecy. There is also Luke using the Force to imitate godlike powers, but that happens after they start worshipping him. In Toy Story 1, the alien toys worship the claw.
The claw.
Of course, the claw is not sentient. There is no grand design or choice in its actions, yet the toys believe.
The claw is our master. The claw chooses who will go and who will stay.
From the examples, you can see how cargo cults tend to be written as either misguided or an outright joke. Again, there is some overlap with the other categories. People might worship an uncaring god that ignores them, a god that does not react, care, or even notice them. The key to a cargo cult is their actions are misguided and do not influence the thing they worship. The evil god category is probably the most common fictional type of cult. This includes cults that worship powerful individuals, things, even if they are not technically a god. In Dagon 2001, based off H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innismouth, the town worships Dagon in exchange for wealth and gold. Dagon's influence corrupts them, giving them what they seek, but also twisting and deforming them. They act like a true cult. They are secretive, attack the visitors to sacrifice to Dagon. If you're interested, it's a pretty good adaptation of Lovecraft. In 1892's Conan the Barbarian, the cult of the Children of Doom follow the evil sorcerer Thulsa-Doom, himself a follower of the evil snake god Set. This version is different from the literary version, and rather than a religion, it is shown much more like a cult. In one scene, Thulsa-Doom commands one of his female followers on the high ledge to come to him. She jumps off the ledge to her death. On Doom's death, it's revealed that many of his cultists were mind-controlled. In Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1984, Indiana is asked to recover a relic called a Sankara Stone. Indiana finds thuggy cultists conducting human sacrifices. The cult is revealed to have brainwashed Zalim Singh, the 13-year-old ruler, and were abducting the children of Mayapur, using them as slave labor to find the remaining stones. There are some pretty intense scenes in this one, including the famous Kali Mal heart pluck. As you've seen in the last two movies, there is a tendency with cults where the cultists are being brainwashed or mind-controlled somehow. This allows the writer to rehabilitate them after the heroes do their thing. But in reality, humans can be evil without mind control. A leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudice of ordinary people rather than using a rational argument is called a demagogue. They manipulate their followers, and while not all cult leaders fit this type, many of them do. It's up to you if you want your cult to represent a few evil people controlling others through magical or mental means, or if you want to show the inherent capacity of evil within people. After all, the battle line between good and evil runs through the hearts of every man. The last category of cult is the self-improvement or self-actualization cult. This group can be one of two types. First, where the cult manipulates its members by offering things like wealth, money, relationships, and so on, but is actually just fake with no real benefits. For example, you might pay a fee to get taught how to achieve your goals, and you're simply taught basic goal setting. Or you may need to get to silver level alpha in order to get to the real great stuff, but you never seem to meet anyone who's gotten there before. Remember, manipulation, secrecy, authoritarianism. The fantasy version of this and the second type is where it's actually true. Cult members gain powers, or the cult collective is able to perform miracles with focused mental powers. The movie I mentioned before, The Empty Man, falls into this category, with cultists attracted to the self-improvement aspects. It also captures the more contemporary concepts of self-actualization directly manifesting into reality. So with those four covered, we now have our categories and our cult's intents: end of the world, cargo cult, evil god, or self-improvement, and their modus operandi, being aligned behind an atypical idea or concept, being secretive, manipulative, authoritarian, often quasi-religious, with a charismatic leader. So when making a cult, follow these headings to guide your ideas. First, name. This could be two names, the official name and the common name. For example, the Children of the Wayward God might also be called Wayers. Next, the type of cult. So be they apocalypse, cargo cult, evil god, or self-actualization. Next, leader. The leader of the cult, or their cult name, for example, Great Leader, Brother, Number One, etc. What they're aligned by, the idea or concept that guides the cult. If there are two, for example, one most cultists believe and then one the inner circle follows, put down both. The authoritarian traits. How does the cult control its members and deal with disobedience? Manipulative traits. How does the cult manipulate and breed dependence within the current members and indoctrinate new ones? Secrecy traits. What does the cult keep secret, and what methods do they use? For example, they might keep their inner workings secret. They might have secret leadership structures or secret facilities. And lastly, the broad description of the cult. This could include operating methods, history, structure, and any other things that might be relevant. Follow all these to help you guide your thinking. I'm going to wrap up the video there. In part 2, I'm going to run through some cults and explain the workings of how I made them. This includes where I've drawn ideas from, background, and where I had to rework certain aspects. Thank you for listening to this episode of GMspiration. Like and subscribe to reach Alpha Gold Sigma level, and remember to have fun.